So I am here today with Jacob Richardson from Hometown Title in Kingwood, Texas, and we're just going to kind of wrap a little bit about, what it means to have a title company, what the advantages are of their title company, and why it's important to, first-time home buyers, newlyweds, and stuff especially. So, Jacob, tell us a little bit about Hometown Title, and what separates you guys from some of the other title companies in the area.
Well, so Hometown Title was started in 2019. Me and two other guys started it, and we basically were looking to start a title company that was different. We'd had experiences with title companies. I'm a real estate attorney. One of my other business partners at the time was a real estate attorney. And we just basically thought that there could be a different way to do things. I come from rural East Texas, so for me, I wanted to bring, at least to have an experiment and see if I could bring that hometown type feel, small town environment where everybody knows everybody, treats everybody respectfully, to an urban or suburban type environment. Mm-hmm. And I think making it this year will be our actual fully fifth year. I think that's one of those deals. We're actually going to have a 5-year celebration, but that's one of those things where it's like, I think the model's kind of paid off. And we've seen people respond well to it and such. And, the last, in February of 2023, we joined up with the Fortis. We merged with the Fortis Title Company, which has offices all throughout East Texas, all the way over to Beaumont. And it's one of those deals where it's like they meshed in our environment in the way that Hometown Title was run. So, Hometown Title is basically what separates us is, I joke, a realtor told me this, and so I give her credit for it, but a realtor told me that where you close matters. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And she said, can you expand on that, Jacob? Because I think that you really could expand on it better than anybody. And I said, well, yeah, I think that's a good thing. So where you close matters, because most title companies, and I'm not saying all of them, look to limit their liability and then close the deal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whereas Hometown Title, we've always felt like it was our job to close the deal while limiting our liability. And there's a big difference in the way that says. Mm-hmm. So beginning from, I can even go back and show you our business plan when we started it, when we're thinking about it. It was client experience, and the experience that the realtors have and their clients matters more than anything else. The whole thing was set up around your clients, because I always felt like if your clients had a great experience, my goal was always to have them refer you to 3 people. So when they left our office, they go and refer you to 3 people based on the experience that they had throughout the transaction. And we don't even they don't even know it was us. We want to think it's all you. Mm-hmm. And it's external focus, not internal. And so.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now, that also makes a lot of sense why you would call it Hometown Title.
Right.
Right? You got that feel of just comfort whenever you walk in there. And having closed deals at your office, I can absolutely kind of understand that. And I can attest that, y'all are absolutely doing that.
I appreciate that.
When you walk in, it feels comfortable. It doesn't feel like a high pressure situation, especially for somebody that's like a first time home buyer or something like that. They're unfamiliar with the process, which was my case last time I was in there. Y'all make it feel like a homey environment, that the situation is under control. It's well managed. Everything's going the way that it needs to be going, and it makes the client comfortable. Right?
Well, and you have to think about it. The way I always looked at it was, for residential transactions, they're making one of the largest purchases, if not the largest purchase that they're ever going to make. And so think about the stress level that's on them. Either they're selling and they're moving and they're managing families and what to do and jobs and other homes that they're buying, versus, buying, they're taking out a loan. They don't understand exactly what they're signing, and there's pressure on it. It's a large payment. They're looking at 30 years of amortized payments. Yeah. Right now with 6 to 7% interest rates. We hope those drop. But I mean, I've always looked at it from that standpoint, the stress that's on them, and then trying to take that stress off of the realtor, them. One of the things I like to do, I like to come in and say thank you to everybody. If I'm in the office, I love to come in and say thank you, especially to first time home buyers. We typically have gifts for them and such. I just always like to set that bar. Like, hey, you're going to have the best closing experience here. Then if you close somewhere else next time, it's probably not going to be as good. But
right.
No, I always like to come in and just say thank you, because I'm very appreciative that anybody thinks enough of us to use us.
Yeah, absolutely. In being a realtor, going through all of the steps it takes to work with a buyer, you don't want to have to worry about whenever you hand them off to the title company and get the closing done and, dot all the T's and cross all the I's,
Yeah.
all that stuff. You want to make sure that you're doing it somewhere where it's comfortable, because I've been involved in transactions where it was like, wow, the paperwork wasn't prepared correctly. They didn't do things in a clear and concise way. Filing, maybe things went wrong there. And so you want to be able to have somewhere where you can really trust, not just like you're going to do it the way it needs to be done, but also you feel good when you walk in there and I'm going to hand these people to you and we're good.
Well, and I think it goes, it lends itself to, people ask me all the time what makes like a smooth closing, what makes it smooth, what's the transaction, and I always say it goes back to communication. It goes back communication from the realtor to their client. The realtor, if they're representing a buyer, do they have a lender? The communication, so there's multiple points, there's 3 points of communication there. Right. And then the title company as well. Is everybody communicating? And so the deals and look, I'm very hands-on, very involved. I'm involved in just about every deal. And it's one of those things where it's like, and commercial versus residential, I'm involved in them all. And so basically the way I look at it is, can we communicate? Mm-hmm. Is that communication going to be there? The deals that I see go bad, most of the time it's communication. There was a communication breakdown. Right. One thing I've always heard is, hey, this certain title company doesn't answer the phones. Well, I can't ever get anybody on the phone. And so one of the things I did to combat that is our phones ring the main desk first, and then it rings 3 times, and then it rings everybody else in the office. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows if that thing hits your phone, you better be racing to pick it up, because I wanted to make sure that somebody could always get somebody to talk to. Yeah. And even when we had the hurricane and we were shut down, I had the phones forwarded up to our Huntsville office that was up and going so that somebody could have somebody to talk to. Mm-hmm. And because everybody was worried about whether they could close or not. And so, I'm just always thinking about, do I do everything right? No, we don't do everything right all the time. But anybody who says they do, might want to watch out for. But it's like, we try to think really about that client and what we can do to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, and that's great. And I mean, and like you said, you're dealing with the most important transaction of your life, right? So if you call somebody, you hope they answer the phone, right? Because you're not just going to be calling for questions that don't matter, right? Well, thinking about like peace of mind and comfort, tell me about title insurance and why it's important, especially to, like, if they've never bought a home before, what is it and why is it so important?
Well, people ask me that all the time, and they usually start with, what does a title company actually do?
Right.
Title company does 2 things. The first thing that they do, and it's a very important thing, because the chaos that can ensue otherwise, so we escrow. Mm-hmm. So we're basically the escrow. We're the middle person that receives money and then pays money out to the seller and other parties that are owed, like lenders, etc. And so think about the chaos that would ensue from the standpoint of if you were just giving a seller money, expecting him to execute a deed, and he never does, and he runs off with your money. And so we sit there and we act as a protection for buyers and also sellers to make sure the transaction goes through, and we handle it from that standpoint. So that's the escrow side of it. The other side, the title insurance policy. So I'll be honest with you, prior to becoming a real estate attorney, prior to getting in this world and seeing title insurance and such, I had an opinion, and I've had friends that say, do you really need title insurance? I don't really think you need it. It's a one-time cost that you pay, or somebody pays for you on your behalf when you're buying, and it protects you so that when you go to sell, basically you're able to sell and give or convey good marketable title. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I used to think like, oh, no, it's not. Well, I will tell you, with the stuff that I have seen and over the 5,000 deals that we've done since 2019, you need title insurance. It is a minimum cost. I jokingly say, hey, the majority of your costs are realtor commissions. But no, the main thing is it's a minimum cost compared to what it actually will protect you. And so, let's say somebody later on down the road comes and says, hey, I own this house. You have a title policy that says, no, I'm pretty sure I do. Mm-hmm. And so, we check all that stuff out, and we go through and we make sure that the title, so that when you go to sell it, is good. There's no issues. There's no prior liens that were on the property that weren't paid off. Seller may have had 15 different judgments against them, and we don't want those to come back on you, mm-hmm. on the property. Mm-hmm. Right now, this day and age, HOAs are a nightmare to deal with. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I shouldn't say nightmare, but they're difficult to deal with just because of that's the nature of the beast. So many HOAs are popping up nowadays. And there's a reason why they're there. but they, might put something on the property. And so we just make sure all that stuff's taken care of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to simplify it a little bit, something that most people are familiar with, it's similar to a car title, right? Would you buy a car from somebody where you had no idea that they're the actual owner and, it is as what they say it is, and so it protects them from ultimately making a really bad decision, right, that they didn't know they were making.
Well, yeah, so I've seen it come into play for a buyer. So I've seen this on the outside looking in, but there was a claim made. Basically, a seller was an estate, and this gentleman he'd gone through the process to a certain extent, but hadn't gone all the way through the probate process. And he decided he was going to sell his mom's house. Sells the house, hid heirs, hid that there was any other heirs to the property, and anyway, property closed. It then went closed through another title company, and then the third buyer is trying to sell it, and come to find out he can't because this heir has popped up and sued the executor of the estate because he was left off of everything. And title insurance stepped in and made it right for the seller of that transaction because I think it ended up being about a $200,000 claim.
Yeah, and it wasn't their fault.
It wasn't their fault.
They wouldn't have known, right?
It wasn't their
But
fault. There were
could have
two
been on it.
subsequent title policies that ended up paying on it, and yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely worth having and protecting, especially for the minimal investment that it is. Awesome. Well, there's a lot of costs and a lot of things to talk about and think about whenever a couple just gets married and they're buying a home and they're trying to figure out kind of how to move forward and what to do and get started and all that sort of stuff. So like on topic, but also kind of a parallel topic, what is some advice that maybe you have for couples that just got married, they're merging finances, they're thinking about like what to do, how to move forward, what kind of things to consider? Do we merge everything? Do we keep some stuff separate? Like, what's been your experience as you've worked with new home buyers and stuff in terms of how they organize things getting started?
Yeah, so, I'm a burn the boats kind of guy. So basically, if you go into it with separate bank accounts, separate assets, separate all this stuff, are you really burning the boats and fully committing to the relationship? Mm-hmm. So I'm always one of those, hey, I'm going to go full in until we have to figure something else out. But I'm always when we're going to fight through it, we're going to try to figure it out. But, I think for new home buyers, new buyers and newlyweds, period, I think you need to have those hard conversations. So a lot of times nowadays, people want to punt things. Mm-hmm. People want to punt those conversations. Oh, it's too difficult right now. We just want to be in that love spell phase. Well, look, I've been married 14 years, and it's one of those things where it's like that love. You go through phases in marriage over time, but it's basically having those hard conversations and having someone. I think it builds and grows that relationship so much. Mm-hmm. Having those tough financial decisions. One spouse may feel like they may not have a handle truly on the finances, and they feel like they can afford more than what they really can. And I think what I see a lot is that we see the CD. When the CD gets put to them, what their payment's going to be, they look at their initial first payment. A lot of deals sometimes bust at the last minute because they see that. Yeah. And they didn't realize that their payment was going to be X. They thought it was going to be a lot lower than X. And, then they see taxes and they see all that stuff. And so I think I put a lot of that on, and I would like to encourage them. So how do I fix that, or how do I remedy that? I want to do a lot of education to realtors and say, hey, if you're working with those kind of buyers, first-time home buyers, newlyweds, I think that's a discussion that they need to have before you even start showing them houses. Because if they can't even come anywhere near a $500,000 house, they don't need to be looking at them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what's the rule of thumb? I think it's like 25% of your take-home should be devoted toward, no more than 25% to a mortgage. And so I think it's by sticking to those principles, it sets yourself up. Because if you have that financial stress in your life and in your marriage, your marriage is tough enough. You then those things, it's just setting it up for maybe failure or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And when buying a home or a car or any of that sort of stuff, I feel like merging those things and getting them put you in a more manageable position because you know what you've got and where it's going and all that sort of stuff too. So yeah, that makes total sense.
And I'm not someone who can budget. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I know what I can spend, what I can't spend, but if you can budget, hey, more power to you. I can't do it, but it's hard for me to do it. My wife definitely can't either, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned realtors a couple times as well. Obviously, like what are some things that y'all do specifically for realtors at Hometown that helps them and makes everything a little bit more comfortable?
Well, so the thing that we do the most is I always give realtors my cell phone, and I encourage them to text me, call me when they have questions. When they're going through the contract, whether it's on the weekends, whether it's at night, I encourage that. And so what we've really tried to do with our classes and such is we'll let underwriters come in and teach like certain things. But when it comes to the contract, when it comes to smooth closings, things of that nature, I want to be there giving them that resource for the realtors. Mm-hmm. And I joke with people all the time. I joke with a lot of realtors, DocuSign's not your friend. I heard a story this morning from I counseled a buyer through it. Basically, a buyer called asking about the contract. And did the seller give them any concessions? Did they have a home warranty? All these kind of things. And they didn't know who was paying for title policy, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what does your contract say? And I said, I never want to say, well, didn't your realtor walk you through that? Right. But I'm like, because I don't want to ever throw a realtor under the bus, and that's why I don't leave those classes somewhere else, because we're never going to throw realtors on the bus. Mm-hmm. If anybody's going to fall on the sword, it will be me. I'll take my butt chewing, I'll take my fall on the sword. They'll let me be that guy. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things where I walked them through, and I said, it goes back to, I tell realtors all the time, DocuSign is not your friend. One of the things I really encourage realtors to do is go through the contract before you ever send it over. Mm-hmm. DocuSign to your buyers to read, or sellers. Sure. Go through it with them. And you may have made a mistake. Hey, people make mistakes. I've seen a realtor put $10,000 in as option money and $500 as earnest. And it's like, that's a big mistake if you didn't mean to do that, because the option money goes hard.
Absolutely.
And so, and it can be automatically released to the seller if they want it. But that's one of those deals where it's like, go through and know those things and just say, hey, you may not really understand this or realize this, but this is what you're doing. This is who's paying for this. They're going to be in such a state of confusion that they're probably going to miss it.
Yeah.
But at least you've gone through that with them. And because most of the time what I see is they go through, they DocuSign so fast, they read nothing. And then when it comes up to where they're paying $3,000, $4,000 that they weren't expected to pay, they get mad and they're like, well, I didn't agree to this.
Right,
right. You did. And it's like, but, and that's the hardest conversations that I have to have are a week before closing, going in and talking to them. The realtor's there, the client's there, and they're like, who made me sign this? And it's like, well, this is what you signed. This is what you were obligated to pay. And go from there.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is kind of being in a partnership with the realtor through the transaction, rather than just accepting what they send you at face value and going, this is right, and go, let's do this transaction, right? If something doesn't look right, mentioning it, working together to make sure that no one ends up with egg on their face whenever you get to the closing table.
Without a doubt.
The client's confused, yeah.
And ask questions, so if you don't understand as the realtor, ask questions. If the buyer doesn't understand or the seller doesn't understand, ask questions. Mm-hmm. Ask your realtor. I think I look at my role as a quarterback or facilitator. Hey, I've always said it from the beginning. I knew I wasn't going to be the smartest or whatever, and so it's like, hey, I will find somebody who's smarter than me that can answer that question. I'll come back and get you an answer.
Right.
And I think that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Know what you don't know. But so many want to plod through for pride or whatever reason it is, and it's like, hey, it's okay. I mean, it's hard. Life is hard enough. Let's get through it. Let's ask questions. But I think that's the biggest thing for us is basically, let's communicate. Mm-hmm. You as a realtor working with those, having good lenders, having good title companies. And look, I always tell people, we don't need to be your only title company.
Yeah.
But you don't need to only have one, because we may not be able to. It's rare, but we may not be able to do the deal. But it's one of those things where your other one may not, and then you got to switch during the middle of the deal. You have to know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great partners that we've seen, and that they're really good at what they do, but they're the bedside manner per se is not as good as what it should be.
Right, absolutely, definitely.
I think that's the only reason why some people come back to me as an attorney or title company is it's like, I'll tell you, I'm not the smartest attorney and definitely not the smartest title person, but it's walking people through and knowing what I don't know. I think that's one of my strengths.
Awesome, love it. Well, I get the sense Hometown Title Company, if anybody is in need in our area, is a great place. It feels like home. It feels comfortable. It's been my experience working with you guys.
Thank you.
Anytime I take a client to you, I know they're going to get treated right, and everything's going to be as smooth as it could have gone. Yeah. So it's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you answering all the questions. You'll be a continued referral for me, absolutely. And
well, thank you, man. That's humbling.
Yeah, for sure. And look forward to doing more deals in the future.